Be one of us.
One of us.
All right. Woo! Google
Give it up for the unicorn.
We accept her.
Come on in.
Join us for events now.
The actual.
We're talking events now.
Like if we're out, look at the sun. As it gets later in the day, the sunlight starts turning a little bit more yellow. And what's happening is you're getting less blue light in there. And that's when your body starts producing melatonin. And that's pretty much the key sign to your body going, all right, guess what? It's time to sleep now. It's time to nap. So I'm convinced this is one of the reasons why so many of us that are computer geeks end up staying up super late as the nights go on in office because we're getting this bright white light, this bright blue light being beamed into our eyes. So there's a couple of key tricks that I end up using to help deal with this. If any of you have seen my cell phone late at night, you'll see it that it's actually looking almost red or almost orange. I've got an application on my cell phone entitled, it's called Twilight, which changes that color temperature based on the time of day. Same thing you can end up doing for your computers. There's an application called Flux. F.Lux, exactly. See, some of you guys have heard of it. Or, unfortunately, I don't have it with me. It's up in my room. You can get on Amazon. Google for SCT Orange. That's SCT Orange. It's a specific color. And these are these orange glasses. And what these orange glasses are doing is they're blocking blue light. And they're blocking these specific wavelengths of blue light, which help inhibit melatonin. So in other words, if you're having problems sleeping, I suggest going on Amazon. Seriously, they're like $10. I'll admit you look dorky and completely geeky, but you know, look, I'm a geek anyway, so I'm just gonna accept that. Yeah, exactly. Just embrace it. But you put it on, and it blocks all the blue light coming in. And you put it on an hour or two before you want to go to sleep. It's amazing. Especially useful if you're like me. I'm a constant traveler. I'm a bit of a nomad. In the last 3 years, I haven't spent more than 11 days in a row in any one city. I'm always jump on a plane, go to a new place, a new time zone. So I wear that before I want to go to bed. And that really helps me sleep far better. The other thing you can do with this is sleep with an eye mask on. Ideally, if you're at home, you know, what you do is you try and use blackout shades, blackout curtains, block all the light as humanly possible. I'll even do so much as like the little blue LEDs, which seem to be on absolutely every piece of technology I own these days. I'll put little pieces of tape over those. But when I'm traveling, I can't get away with that. So I'll end up using a really nice sleep mask, an eye mask, basically a good blindfold, to end up blocking all the light. Yeah, or a face mask, exactly.
Yep, also useful.
My favorite one, Brookstone Napform Sleep Mask. It's amazing. It'll fully block out all light. Definitely Jolly approved. So we've talked a little bit about light. And one of the other interesting things going back to melatonin is it seems that even tiny amounts of light, even on say the back of your knee, will end up inhibiting melatonin production. So if you want good quality sleep, basically we do it in the dark. You know, some things are a little bit better in the dark. Try it with a blindfold. Trust me, Jolly approved. Hello, welcome. We're talking about sleep and sleep hygiene and advanced napping, and theoretically there's actual panelists here, but...
Well, you're now the panelist, just keep going.
Yeah, okay,
Panelist. He's not.
I'm not officially the panelist for this. I'm apparently doing a panel on space at some point tomorrow, but I also spend a lot of my time geeking out on biochemistry and neurochem and a lot of this. Go for it. Questions?
So, I know you spend a lot of your time traveling.
Yes.
Do you often find that your sleep schedule gets messed up when you cross time zones? How do you counteract that?
So, definitely so. As I said, I'm always traveling, always jumping on planes, and there's a couple things I do. One, it's going back to those orange glasses. So if I arrive in a new time zone, I'm going to wear those a couple hours before I want to go to bed. When I do go to bed, I definitely use those sleep masks. Definitely helps. You can also do external melatonin. And you'll see it in the stores, and they'll usually sell it somewhere between 500 micrograms up to 3 or even 10 milligrams. You probably don't need that much. Most of the time, the doses that they end up giving you are way too high. So I suggest starting at just 500 micrograms.
Interesting effect. Lower doses of melatonin can actually be more effective. So if you're like, man, I'm super sleepy, get this 2 milligrams, that might actually fuck with you.
Yes.
Sometimes I buy them, but then I split them before.
Definitely. The hard thing with melatonin is melatonin has a very short half-life, so it's only really effective for only about half an hour or so. So definitely take it early on, do it, or you can look at the time-release ones too, depending on who you are and who your needs are. You could also take the same light tricks and do the reverse of it. So in the morning when it's time to wake up, Philips sells like this. They call it like the Go Light Pro or something. Just Google Philips like wake up light, and they're basically these banks of blue LEDs, which you can do in the morning to again help reset your sleep cycle. So that ends up being pretty effective from that way. A lot of the other things, interestingly, if you start digging into some of the research, noise ends up impacting people significantly, and this happens not just from a sleep perspective, but even from cognitive performance. They did this fantastic study. They looked at basically students that were just in an elementary school and their test scores. But the interesting thing with the elementary school is one side was closer to the train tracks, so they had more noise going back and forth through there. And the students that had the classrooms that were closest to the train tracks ended up being a lot worse on measures of cognitive performance. So, if possible, I end up sleeping with earplugs on. There's a couple ones I end up suggesting. If you're looking for reusable ones, these are from Earplug Superstore, really useful. Or if you're looking for foam earplugs, Heroes sells an amazing set of earplugs.
Yeah,
We thought you guys were in this room wrapping up another presentation.
No, like they said sleep, and I just ended up coming up and talking about sleep. So, all right, guys, you've got your official panelists there. So, give it up for your official panelists.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Not a problem.
All these people were here, and there were a bunch of people out in the hallway with me.
I know a lot about sleep.
Well, thank you for giving everybody a bonus.
No problem.
We'll
before I leave.
I could just I don't think the line makes sense for you to track.
Oh darn, I have 2 meetings.
Marie and Ed.
hopefully.
Hi, Marie.
Hello.
Hi, Penguicon!
Hi!
You guys are such awesome fun. All right, let's see. We're still getting some people, so I'm gonna try not to jump the gun. It's difficult. Okay, we'll start with the unimportant bits. Hi, I'm Marie, and I've been polyphasic for about the last 7 years solid. I've been on the Everyman schedule for most of that time. I also slept on the Uberman schedule for 6 months. I wrote a bunch about it. I wrote a website on it. I wrote a book about it. There's a book about it. It's a really nice book. It was laid out by my friend who is an unbelievable typography nerd and a really good graphic designer, and I gave him full leash to do anything he wanted artistically. So if you want any, I have them. I have a few more in my room. Let me know. That's the boring part. But I've written a lot about napping, and so today I figured instead of just talking about polyphasic sleep, there's birds of feather session for polyphasic sleep tomorrow. I would talk about napping in general, like how, regardless of whether you're going to be polyphasic, what are some things we can do to improve quality and availability and fit ability of naps into our lives. Because napping is awesome. Raise your hand if I need to convince you that napping is awesome. Anybody? Okay, all right. Cool, thanks Dad. All right, so there's plenty of research that shows that getting a short sleep during the day is good for you. Just testimonial-wise, most people will tell you that if they're able to get a short nap in the middle of the day, that they feel more refreshed, that they think better, that they don't feel that slump in the late afternoon. Our bodies and minds seem to respond really well to being able to get a short sleep, regardless of what else we're doing with our sleep, whether we didn't sleep well previous night or we slept awesome and are just taking a nap, or we replace some of our sleep with naps. As far as questions go, we'll let people just raise your hands for questions as we go, but if it gets to be too much and is taking us too much time, we'll switch over to just like getting through the rest of it. Do you want to introduce yourself before I get too much further?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ed. My experience with sleep comes from a few things. One, I was biphasic, so I slept in 2 4-hour shifts throughout a day, which is a little different from what Marie's experience is. So I was sleeping a full 8 hours, just breaking it up into separate chunks. So definitely some napping experience there when you're sleeping at strange times of your day. In addition to that, I'm a big fan of naps. I like naps. So I'm always trying to find better ways to take naps if I'm on a train, if I'm doing things like that. So I've got lots of hacks I can talk about there. And in general, in the past, I've slept very poorly. So I've done a lot of reading and experimenting with things like sleep hygiene and different things to improve sleep quality. So I'll probably be chiming in with some thoughts on those things today too.
And then also skipping over the part where he's a really, really smart guy. He does a lot of interesting stuff with software and etc. So you should, feel free to not skip over that in the future if you need to insert context.
Okay.
All right, awesome. So if there's no questions before we start, why don't we start by talking about, there's the question.
Oh,
that we
so
can talk about.
you said you had slept with the Abraham method? I didn't know what that was.
Uberman.
Uberman.
Yeah, so I named it that actually. The Uberman sleep schedule is just 20-minute naps, no other sleep, and they're every 4 hours around the clock, evenly spaced. So your total sleep time in a 24-hour period is 2 hours. It's really, really different. I've written a lot about it, and I could talk forever about how different it is, and I will at the Birds of a Feather session tomorrow. But yeah, that's that one. Yes?
2 quick questions.
Yes.
One, for the benefit of people who don't know what polyphasic sleep is, can you tell them about that? And 2, did you write an article on corrosion like 10 years ago about this?
No, I was cited in the article on corrosion.
Awesome.
I did not write that, but it was a pretty good article. That was one of the better ones. There have been a few that were really good and quite a few that were not. I've been interviewed for quite a few that were not, and several that were. So that's excellent. Anyway, so polyphasic sleep is a system to modify your sleep schedule, just like being vegetarian is a system to modify your diet. In polyphasic sleep, you replace chunks of your usual monophasic, one big chunk of sleep at night, with naps. The spacing and duration and timing of the naps, hi Neil! The spacing and duration and timing of the naps is determined by, like, I don't know, there's a lot of trial and error that's gone on with a lot of people to kind of test out what seems to work. Some of it's gut. Coming up with Uberman was gut. After that, after I had done that and written about it, people started suggesting that maybe we could create a core nap, like a 3-hour chunk at night, and then you could just have a couple naps. And I tried that, and it's brilliant, and I've pretty much been doing it ever since. And other people have, like, we've tested out different, timings. Can you sleep 4.5 hours at night and take 2 naps during the day? Yes, that seems to work. Things like that. So that's what polyphasic sleep is. Okay, that was a good question. All right, so let's start with napping at work, because this is a question that I just get a ton, and I have a lot of experience with it because I've worked several jobs while I've been polyphasic. And my phone is an idiot, so it's about to say command cancel. But there are a couple questions that I usually get about napping at work. One is, how do I do it given my boss? How do I do it given, the fact that it's going to look weird, given the fact that they might tell me that I can't do it. I actually wrote a couple bits and I put them into the second edition of the book here, specifically on talking to bosses about it. And so I guess the main points of that would probably be that most people have a lunch break that's about an hour. I personally have often just eaten at my desk while I was working and said I would rather have a nap than a lunch. If you have a car, it's really convenient to be able to go down and sleep in your car because then there's no artifacts of nappery hanging around your area. That can be useful. It depends a lot on the business. I prefer to work for small companies, and I work for a small company now. and there's a couch in our main area, and I just crash out in front of everybody over lunchtime for 20 minutes, and no one minds at all. It's great. But I've certainly slept in a car. I've slept in a server room. Server rooms are actually really comfortable. I was a techie. I legitimately had access to the server room, but if you, they're nice and cool, and they've got that nice hum that drowns everything out.
I wish I'd thought of that earlier. I might have to try that.
The server room's quite comfortable, especially if you can get a camping pad in there. Like, if nobody minds if you stash a camping pad, it's great. Any questions so far? Okay. So there's some questions I often get about the equipment that you need in that, like whether you're doing it at work or in a car or anywhere else, what you need to have with you. It makes it a lot easier to fall asleep, to sleep comfortably, to wake up when you want, etc. if you're kind of prepared with the right things. It's nice to sleep in darkness. It does good things for your brain. So if you can bring, like, I just use a sandbag pillow thing that I can just slap over my eyes, or I use one of my shirts or hoodies and put it over my face. It's nice to have some sort of comfortable pillow or neck thing that is particularly good for you. Although since you're only sleeping 20 minutes, you'll find that it matters a lot less. If you sleep in a weird position or something, it's not quite as bad for 20 minutes as it is if you accidentally do it overnight. Make sure you're warm enough, carry small blankets or tiny packable sleeping bags. I kept a sleeping bag in my car when I was doing it because I can't sleep in the cold. I always have the kind of coat with me that I can throw over me. I usually have an extra layer that I don't really need just so that I can throw it over me and sleep. Timers are great. I just use my phone. I think almost everybody would use their phone. It's nice if you can make it so that it plays songs when you wake up, or if you have trouble with noise, you can set it to play a white noise track that's the length of your nap. I used to have one that ended with roosters and chiming bells and stuff. It was great. I don't need a white noise track anymore. I don't use one, but they were useful. I think that's all of the medical equipment I can think of. Can you see anything?
Yeah, that's
Something that's on my wish list is, those little horseshoe pillows that you can get for...
I have one of those. They're great.
They make one that's got a hoodie built into it.
I
I think it's kind of one of
really
those
useful.
as seen on TV kind of things. But
Yeah, I've
had
seen
my
that. I think I
little
actually
hat.
posted that when it came out.
Actually, I have one thing to add to that. So those little travel pillows, they keep you from getting a crick in your neck, but
Make sure you speak up, 'cause those guys are great.
okay, yeah. So they keep you from getting a crick in your neck, but some people actually need that feeling of having your head resting on something to be able to fall asleep. And one thing that I've actually found helpful is if you have a blanket, like a small blanket, you can just fold it up and drape it around your neck, and then you've got this big puffy thing that you can just lay back in. And it looks a little weird, but it works way better than those little travel pillows.
Let's talk about looking a little weird, because that's another one that I get, and it's whether or not you're at work or I have crashed out. Wow, if I crashed out a lot of places. I used to sleep just on the quad leaning up against a tree. I've slept in libraries. I've slept in colleges that I absolutely had no business in other than to walk in and sleep there. I've also slept in my own college to balance it out. Colleges are actually great places. If you happen to be near one, if you walk into one of the buildings, they usually have like some cushy benches somewhere in a hallway and nobody will bother you. It's 20 minutes, so you don't need to find like a hotel room. You just need a place that you can sleep. Number of times I've ever been messed with while I was napping in public, 0. Places I have lived and been polyphasic include Southeast Michigan for a long time, as well as Boston and Santa Fe and college campuses and stuff like that. Never, ever had a problem with somebody actually like trying to steal my stuff or anything like that. Airports, I have a big hiking backpack that I use instead of a rolly thing or whatever. And I'll like sit down against a wall and lean my backpack against a wall and shove something behind my neck. And just, nobody's ever messed with me. So that's nice, and I think part of it is you're just not asleep for very long. Especially if you wake up automatically. I wake up automatically at this point, so I don't, Go ahead.
How many times have you actually been woken up while sleeping?
I'm sorry?
How many times have you been woken up while sleeping?
Oh, not messed with, just
Woken up.
other people
Yeah.
bothering you.
Well, it happens, the phone rings and it's your mom or, somebody...
No, someone intentionally trying to wake you up.
Oh, somebody intentionally trying to wake me up? It's very, very, very rarely. Mostly, actually, I think I can think of twice, and it's because I was sleeping in my car in a parking lot, and somebody thought that I was unconscious or something. I had a cop knock on my door once, and I had a well-meaning little old lady do it. But that's really about it. Like, you know, if you're sleeping on a park bench or in a hallway or something, you know, the worst that's going to happen is usually people, you know, think degenerate as they walk past you. But, you know, how many people are going to walk past you in 20 minutes, too? I have been ostracized for sleeping in a restaurant. They don't like that. And I wasn't just being a slob. There's a restaurant that we go to after a weekly hockey game. We've been going there forever. You know, it's like we know everybody, but they changed management. And we went there and we're doing our usual crash out on the benches. And yeah, they told us that we couldn't do that, which sucked. We stopped going.
Similar story, actually. For those of you who don't know me, I don't drink, but I was once kicked out of a bar for napping. Apparently, they don't like it when you nap in bars.
They don't like people who don't drink.
And they also don't like people who don't drink. So, yeah, that's my story about how I got kicked out of a bar while I
So
was
perhaps
completely
avoid
sober.
food-related establishments.
Yeah.
In my younger days, I was not above utilizing the numerous big box stores in the area. Places like Myers and whatnot have a section that is beds and like big furniture next to each other. You can always find a comfortable place to be, and especially if it's late. Like when I was on Uberman, I did this a lot because if it's late, it's really easy to just find a place that you can wedge yourself and comfortably pass out. There's a pillow right there, and you pull it down on the floor, and you're like, oh, great. And yeah.
One note on the napping at Myers. When I was on the midnight shift, there was a Myers on my way home. I had a 30-minute commute, but sometimes that 30-minute commute was just too long. So I'd stop at that Myers, and it got to the point where there were actually sales reps that would keep people from robbing me when I stopped.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, I was more doing it out of a sense of, you know, entitlement and middle finger to big box stores than friendliness with people there. But you know, it worked out either way. That's awesome. So yeah, there are a lot of places you wouldn't think of. There are a lot of places that, you know, especially if you live in a relatively walkable neighborhood, and if you don't live in a relatively walkable neighborhood, you've probably got a car with you, which is the perfect napping device. There are a lot of things you can do to make your car more comfortable for napping, and you can store the gear in your car to nap very neatly in a single shopping bag or something. Like it's really, having a car is a good way to do it too. Although I haven't had a car for the last year and a half, and it hasn't impacted me that much. I sleep at the makerspace, I sleep at the planning gym. It's Boston, so I can't sleep outside very often, but I sure sleep outside when I do, when it's nice, when I can, when it's nice. Colleges to sleep at.
Yeah, a great way to not have people bother you when you're sleeping is to go to college, or like I do, work at a college. It's totally normal behavior in my work environment.
That's true.
You kept saying that you take 20-minute naps. Does that include the time it's going to take you to fall asleep, or do you actually assume you're going to be asleep for 20 minutes, so if it takes you 5 minutes to fall asleep, it's really 25 minutes involved in
Yep.
trying to do a thing?
Yeah, I get this question a lot too. The answer is yes. So what it is you don't allow yourself any extra time beyond 20 minutes to begin with when you're learning to do it. Or if you have reason to believe that your time is a little bit different, you change it. You go, okay, I'm going to try 23 minutes or something, you know, because 20 minutes doesn't seem quite long enough. Start with 20 minutes as a baseline. You set a timer for 20 minutes. You lay down, But when you get adjusted to the schedule, you start falling asleep immediately.
Okay.
Like less than a minute. You know, and so, you know, now depending on how on my schedule I am and all of that, like I might take a few minutes to fall asleep, and I might deliberately take a few minutes to fall asleep, set my timer for 5 extra because I just know I'm going to need it to relax. But when you're learning how to do it, you do it at 20 minutes straight,
Okay.
and that trains you to fall asleep real quick. Yes.
So, for someone who's going to try this, is there a schedule you'd suggest starting with, or how do you feel your way into what works for you? And how much variability do you think is there an optimum schedule for everybody, or is it really a matter of trying to find what works for you personally?
There are a lot of things that go into it. I don't want to just like read from this, but I have like a full list of like how to determine what schedule you want to determine if you should be polyphasic. contraindications and stuff like that. But the short answer is it comes down to both lifestyle. You know, what is your world like, and what do you need to be available for, and how, and also just your physiology and your preferences. Some people like sleep and they like to maintain a chunk of sleep. They like that specifically. They like that feeling that the day is rolling over into a new one. That's something you don't really take much notice of until it's gone. When you don't go to sleep at night and wake up, like I'll sleep and I'll be in my clothes for 24 hours. It doesn't make sense to put on pajamas for 20 minutes. And so you're just kind of like rolling with it. And you're like, oh, it's really weird feeling when you don't go to sleep and wake up tomorrow. Also, what do you do about things like brushing your teeth? If I brush my teeth before bed, I go to bed. That's like midnight, 1 a.m. And if I brush my teeth when I wake up, that's 4 o'clock in the morning. Like, no. And then I have to remember to brush my teeth during the day. Messes up your timing in some way. So that's one consideration. Another one is like, what's your job like? Your job is gonna have to let you take at least one nap. But if your job is very forgiving and you work from home, or you're in college or on a broken up schedule that allows for it, then you can do something like Uberman, where you're going to take 3 naps during the day and 3 naps during the night, and that may work great for you, especially if your life kind of tends to follow a momentum and just kind of keep rolling like that. It works really well. But yeah, so there are a lot of things that go into it. You have to consider things like, how much time are you okay spending alone? Your proportion of time alone increases the more you're up at night, and the psychological proportion of time that you're awake increases dramatically more than you probably think it does. When you go, oh, okay, well, that's an extra 4 hours a day. The schedule I'm on, I sleep for a total of 4 hours every 24. So I have an extra 4 hours a day. That is a lot of time. Every day, an extra 4 hours adds up like crazy. And before you know it, you're like, oh my God, I mean, that's 20 hours work week. That's a part-time job's worth of time. But you quickly find out you can't really just spend it all working either.
When you do that, you get that 4 extra hours. Do you feel like you earn at your top tip top anymore? Or do you feel just as good as when you have the usual schedule?
The latter. I feel just as good as I do when I'm like the rest of the time. Now, that's after having adjusted to it. There's an adjustment period, just like, going to a crazy strict diet or something. You're going to have a period where it takes your body time to get used to it. You certainly are tired during that period, a lot in the beginning, and then it goes away gradually, and it takes different amounts of time to go away depending on the schedule you're on. But when it goes away, it's gone. Like, I am not tired, no. In fact, I am way less tired on polyphasic schedules than I ever was on monophasic schedules, hands down.
Does she look tired?
I went to, actually, the funny thing is I am a little tired because I have a regular nap between 7 and 8 p.m. So they scheduled this over my evening nap. And I drank a bunch of coffee and stuff, so I'm like, okay, I feel fine, but yeah, I feel like you would if you were staying up a little late.
Actually, let me chime in real quick.
And after you, I got one.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So when it comes to how you feel, one, I'd like to mention that I think there hasn't been enough research on this yet. I'd love to see more research on this. So it may vary from person to person. It may be for you, it may not be for you. And another thing to keep in mind when you're evaluating how effective a particular schedule is for you is that there are 2 different things. There's how tired you actually are and how effective you actually are, and then there's subjectively how tired you feel. And some of the research that has been done on sleeping by the military, I think it was by the Air Force, actually found that oftentimes nap lengths that made people most effective weren't the ones that made them feel the most effective. So it can help to try to find some objective way to measure how quickly you're thinking and how awake you actually are.
I did a few tests, but yeah, and I completely agree with you about more research. Holy cow, I've been wishing I could put together a study for a while now, and there really needs to be a lot more data on this, but I did typing tests. I figured I type very fast, so during one of my adjustments, I took baselines of my typing, and then I would take typing tests throughout the day and everything. And what happened to me bore out what Claudio Stampi found out from his research, where he's pretty much the only one that ever, under scientific study, had someone adjust to the Uberman schedule or something very like it, and record EEG data and reaction times and all of that stuff throughout it. And he found the same thing that I did, which is that there's a sharp dive. Like, first couple days, you're like, and then you gradually kind of climb back up. And when you climb back up, you absolutely get back to where you were. Some of his data appeared to show that you might actually get back, of course, that you might actually get back up to where you, to slightly above where you were. Yeah, to slightly above where you were. But of course, one subject doesn't mean anything.
I just want to say that losing the schedule for when you brush your teeth really is a big deal. I'm still paying for 5 months on thread shift 17 years ago.
Whew. Okay. Yeah, good point. Thank
So you need to account for it.
Always brush your teeth. All right.
Public service announcement. Sir, try to get you next.
You mentioned caffeine.
Yes.
How does caffeine sort of work into the diet? Because I know right now I sleep around 6 hours a night. All at once, but I always have 2 cups of coffee or more during the day. So
I wouldn't worry about that.
No, that's a really good question. And obviously this is different for different people. I'm one of those people that's been drinking coffee basically my whole life. It's never affected me very much. Like, I know when I've drunk coffee, but it's never prevented me from sleeping. I used to routinely drink most of a pot of coffee at 2 a.m. and go right to bed. So for me, I still drink coffee, although on a polyphasic schedule, you are more sensitive to things like that. Pretty much everyone has found this. So, like, I have to watch when I drink my coffee and make sure that, if I'm drinking coffee, I'm going, okay, I'm going to drink coffee now because it's an hour until my presentation. I'm going to miss a nap and be tired. The coffee will be wearing off in a couple hours when I'm ready to get a nap again. Because I will actually feel it if I try and drink a cup of coffee, like wait a half an hour and take a nap. I can't do that anymore. So yeah, people who are sensitive to it should just quit. Like, just quit because it's not going to be compatible.
I have something to add. There is something called a caffeine nap that a lot of people recommend, where you
That's a good thing to bring up.
where you basically drink a cup of coffee or something right before you go to sleep for your nap, and the idea is that it starts kicking in right as you're waking up.
I do that when I'm road tripping. I'll like stop and buy a big coffee, drink the coffee, take a nap, and then when you wake up, you're good. Okay, so let's get to her. She had her hand up for a long time. Sorry.
All right, so touching back on the research part, I read a study recently that was published at Cambridge University actually last month, that they had analyzed data collected from over 16,000 individuals and found that people who actually took daytime naps for less than an hour were 14% more likely to die young. And
I saw that.
People who took daytime naps that were over an hour were 32% more likely to die young.
Right.
And that they thought, because this also correlated with death due to respiratory and bronchial illness, do you think that this is a factor of like people who have these illnesses are more likely to take daytime naps? Or do you think that there's something really inherently dangerous about daytime napping?
Yeah, I think that, correlation is definitely not causation, and so, yes, it's entirely, I was thinking, I wonder if napping makes you 14% more likely to, get hit by a bus or something, because you're more likely to be asleep during the day, and, or like you said, it could just be that if you have some sort of chronic thing going on with your health, then you're more likely to take a nap during the day. That's entirely likely too. I'm not going to put too much weight in that one as far as napping is deadly. I thought about posting it too. I'm like, that's just pretty funny as far as sleep claims go, but I don't really feel like discussing it.
You don't have an opinion on it?
Huh?
So your opinion is it's just...
My opinion is that it's probably, it's probably a correlation in the data, not that naps are deadly. Yes. That's far more likely sounding, in my opinion. I certainly don't feel any more likely to die. There are plenty of things I do that make me feel more likely to die, and that's not really one of them. So, yeah. All right, cool.
Something I did want to add on the naps, because somebody asked about, how do you feel and stuff. One thing I wanted to point out is, personally, I cannot oversell just the idea of napping in and of itself. So what I would say is, even if I'm not expecting 90% of everybody sitting there to go home and be like, I'm going to be polyphasic tomorrow. But you know what? You'll still feel better if you get a nap. And that's kind of how I started transitioning on that. Is I started just like, you know what, I'm not even going to try to be polyphasic, but every day during my lunch break, I'm going to get a nap. And not only did I feel a lot better, but talking about how to measure performance or whatever, even though it's subjective and not objective, I did have other people comment to me at work. They're like, wow, you seem a little more on the ball. Did you get a nap at lunch or something? Like, actually, yes.
I actually find that eating food, especially eating a big meal, like taking a break and eating a big meal over lunch, will make me more tired in the afternoon. Whereas if I tend to eat small things spaced out anyway, it's probably just because I sleep that way, so it's easy. But I find that just, not worrying about the food and getting a nap will make me feel a lot more awake. And then I'll, if I'm hungry, I'll eat something after I wake up. But then I'm not as tired. So.
Well, in your book, you make an analogy to food, don't you? As far as sleep versus food.
I make a whole bunch of analogies to food because there's systems that sleep is a system, and sleep is definitely a more poorly understood system, I think, than the food system. And so when you talk about hacking it and trying to modify it, it's really easy to tell people, like, this is like doing it with food. Well, do you feel sleep deprived at first? Yes, just like if you're going to take on a macrobiotic diet tomorrow, you're probably going to feel hungry at first. Or if you're going to try fasting or something like that, like there's an adjustment to that. But if you take up something like a stricter or different diet, you don't do it with the intention that you're always going to be hungry. You know that it's going to take time for your body to adjust to it, and then you'll feel better. And it's the same thing with the sleep deprivation.
And the other analogy to point out with that is kind of no matter how much you eat for breakfast, you're probably still going to be hungry by dinner time.
Right, exactly.
And I kind of feel the same way that with sleep. Like I can sleep 9 hours and wake up feeling great, but by the end of the day, I would still be dragging. And so, I feel better getting that nap in the middle of the day than any amount of sleep a night can get me.
Remind me of that later, because there's a really cool, technical point to that I don't want to get into here. We'll do it at the birthday feather. Yeah. All right. Cool. Are we good for the moment? Okay. Hand to the back.
Do you feel that your new schedule is any more or less tolerant to disruptions like today's?
Yeah. So this is where I have to delineate between questions that are answered when you're relatively new on the schedule and questions that are answered when you've been on it for years and years, because it's different in this case. This polyphasic schedules for me were definitely less tolerant. In the beginning, they're not tolerant at all. In order to adapt to the schedule, you have to be dead strict for a period of at least a month or two. You have to build a habit. You have to get physiologically used to it. You are sleeping at these times. You can't mess that up. It starts to relax, but it's still less tolerant than a monophasic schedule of having to push it an hour here or there or something like that. For a while, for me, I think it was about 1.5 to 2 years that it started to be something that if I had to push it around, it was no worse than pushing a monophasic schedule around. I can miss a nap, so I only get 2 naps today, but I'm going to sleep 4.5 hours tonight, or try to. It's Penguicon. And instead of my usual 3, and that'll catch me up and I'll feel just fine. I can switch like that now, but I couldn't necessarily do it before. I can also go, man, it's 7 and it's time for my nap, but I'm doing something and I want to keep going until 7:30. I can just do that, and it won't really impact things. It might impact when I next get tired, but that's really it. So it's got a lot of flexibility now, and it feels actually now a bit, maybe even on the side of a bit more tolerant than a monophasic schedule, but subjectively for me, when I was sleeping monophasically, I historically didn't sleep well. I needed at least 9 hours of sleep a night to feel rested. So I didn't, for me, that felt pretty unforgiving because I usually couldn't get 9 hours of sleep a night and then I always felt tired. And oddly enough, when I was being monophasic and not sleeping well like that, I found that taking an afternoon nap was actually difficult at first. When I tried, because I never actually tried to take naps before I was polyphasic. I wasn't like one of those people like him. I'm just trying to take a nap. Yeah, I went from not sleeping well and being frustrated to doing sleep experiments in college to Uberman. But yeah, I found then that I didn't want a nap during the afternoon because I was sick of sleeping and I'd been in bed all night, and I've always been a techie, so I had computer neck issues going on, and my neck would act up when I was sleeping, and And so it was just like I kind of hated sleep for a long time. Actually being polyphasic made me love sleep again. It took years, but after years of doing it, it was like, oh my God, like now when I sleep, I close my eyes, I feel rested. Not too much time has passed. You know, maybe it's 3 hours, maybe it's, you know, but I get to be a night owl and a morning person at the same time. Like I love it now, but it definitely took some time. In the beginning, it was not as forgiving. But then again, think about it, you've probably been on your monophasic schedule for decades and decades, so it takes a little bit of time, I think, to really transition. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Well,
race condition.
Do you have any tips for like somebody who's like sharing sleeping quarters with somebody else? You know, if you're married and your partner does not want to do the polyphasic schedule, they're not willing to do that,
Right.
but you don't want to suck them into that. Blare them with alarms at 4 in the morning.
Yeah, no, that's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge on the order of, you know, you're living with a partner and you want to get into raising cats and your partner doesn't. Yeah, right, you're living with a partner, full stop. But, but I mean, no, there's definitely like that's a challenge, and because sleeping is such a, you know, fundamental thing for everyone. You mess up your partner's sleep. And I've been married twice while I was polyphasic. So, so yeah, I had this experience. In some cases, you know, it was better to sleep on the couch. You know, rather than get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, disturb somebody else. In some cases, it didn't matter. Also, once you're adjusted to it, you require a lot less in the way of alarms. I frequently will wake up before my alarm. I actually woke up before my alarm this morning at 7 o'clock. And I will often open my eyes at 4, to the point where I set my alarm for 4:15, just so most of the time I don't have to hear it. And like, so that would be much easier, but yeah.
During the adjustment phase.
During the adjustment phase, it's rough, and you usually require some segregation from that, especially if you're doing, I assume you mean adjustment to the sleep schedule, not the relationship.
However, if you do have somebody, I know your question is worried about disturbing the other person like in the middle of the night. However, for your naps during the time when the other person is awake, having sort of what I'll call the mom factor, having some person there to wake you up is
for the adjustment
fantastic, just to make sure that you actually get up. As far as the alarm thing, there's tons of alarms. One thing I would recommend, they have a little Bluetooth vibrating bracelet, or if you have a smartwatch or something like that. Something that will subtly, you know, be enough to wake you up, but not, you know, blaring inside. I don't have one of those in my bin of goodies, but nice.
Excellent.
And yeah, you've been waiting for a long time. Yes, in the green shirt. You. Yes. You.
Okay.
You keep. I'm sorry. You keep raising your hands, and other people keep getting their questions.
Sorry, getting back to the earlier point about the caffeine naps, how do you time that? Like, how long of a nap works for that? Like, because I don't know exactly when the caffeine process, how the caffeine process is to time it.
I don't know the exact numbers, but it's meant for short naps. So, you know,
It takes about 20 minutes.
It's like 15.
Caffeine
20.
caffeine takes about 15 to 30 minutes to hit you after you drink it, and then it'll stick around for several hours, between 4 and 8, depending on you. But yeah, you basically drink coffee, take a 20-minute nap. And it's worth mentioning too that, you know, length of naps, whether or not you're polyphasic, is important. Short naps are really, they really work better. Unless you are biphasic, and I've not been biphasic, but you know, there are many people who take a long siesta nap during the day, many people who take a long siesta nap during the day and sleep, you know, like 6 hours at night. And that works for whole countries full of people. But when you're talking about, especially polyphasic sleeping, but even just getting naps when you can get naps, it's things that are less than 30 minutes really tend to work a lot better. And I'm personally an advocate of 15 to 25. I started with the 20-minute timer like you do, and I went up to 23 for a while, and I've been, you know, I've hovered around 21 for a time. I'm now at 19, to the point where people will make jokes and set timers on them. Like 19 minutes, I'm like, just, so yeah. But yeah, the longer naps, sometimes people are like, oh, I'm taking an hour nap during this. Like, that will make you tired. Your sleep cycles are such that you're gonna get way too deep asleep.
I've been difficult to transition in either direction, from wakefulness to sleeping or the other way around. Do you have any really good tips for how to expedite that process?
Oh yeah, I'm sure all of us do actually. You want to start with some of the tech?
Yes, I've got a goodie right here. Hold on.
Neil and his box of goodies. This has become a fun part of this.
This is maybe a little less recognizable than what you'd see because it's missing the cover, but this is what is the brand? BioBright is the brand, and it is a light alarm clock. So when instead of or in addition to an audible alarm, it will actually slowly turn on a light. It's sometimes called a sunrise alarm. And so I will use this for nighttime naps. I don't know if your question pertains at all to daytime naps. Normally when it's daytime, there's just not a lot of trouble getting up from a nap. I mean, and there have been times where I've laid down to take a 10 p.m. nap, and then I've woken up the next morning. It's like, well, having some sort of light source very much helps. But it's a double-edged sword. As Marie said, it's a lot better to sleep in the dark, but it's a lot better to wake up.
At night, I tend to leave my lights on, and I just cover my eyes like I would during the day. And that way, when my alarm goes off, I take the cover off my face and it's bright in the room. That's something that helps. Transitioning, let's do some more waking up stuff if you guys have any. We'll be going to sleep stuff.
Well, on a similar note, and I think this probably works better for waking up from longer periods of sleep and into longer periods of wakefulness. There are the seasonal affective lights. I actually used one that was recommended to me by a doctor, and he suggested you can get timers, just timers that you plug into an outlet that at certain times of day turn things on and off. So whether it's a light like that or any other thing, just using a timer can be a really effective way.
Specific to waking up from naps too, especially, this is a trick that people use in the adjustment period to polyphasic sleep, but it also works just for if you have trouble, waking up and transitioning out of a nap, for whatever reason. You can do things like you can use those outlet timers in some clever ways, but also, I'll get to some of those. One of the things that I would do is set up a smoothie in the blender, turn it on, leave the little outlet timer off, make sure it was going to go off in 20 minutes, and then go take a nap, or make sure it was going to go off in usually like 30 minutes because they're not that precise, but you're going to use your timers and your alarm to wake up. It's the knowledge that this thing is going to go off in 30 minutes and make a huge mess that will totally wake you up. Also, taking food out of the freezer and leaving it on the counter. Whether or not you're going to cook it, it's nice if you're going to cook it afterwards, but if you leave it there for 20 minutes, it'll be fine, and if you leave it there for longer than 20 minutes, especially if it's ice cream, that's going to suck. I have done these things, like when I was doing the really hard transitions, so setting things up, and more benignly, setting things up that you want to do, that are fun to do. So you want to work on a painting or something, set it all up, and then take your nap. So that when you wake up, there's kind of something to motivate you and something exciting. I frequently have a lot of friends who live abroad in different time zones, and so I would frequently set up calls for them that were going to happen right after I was supposed to wake up from a nap. Having my phone ring is amazing for me because I was a techie for so long. The phone rings and I'm like, and so that's a good one. I sometimes just use my ringtone for an alarm, but it works better if there's something on the other end you have to attend to.
I've actually got another suggestion that's a little less dangerous than the smoothie.
Putting food in the oven.
Yeah,
it's another good one for 20
yeah.
minutes. You better wake up.
So related is coffee machines often come with timers, and I gave up coffee a while ago, and I was sad that I realized this just as I was giving up coffee. But just the smell of brewing coffee, is really good at waking you up.
My parents had that.
Part of waking up.
Yes, I would go that far.
My parents had one of those, so I always remember the smell of coffee permeating the house right before everybody was going to get up in the morning. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we got more of these. We'll just spit the mess we've got. Let's see. Ma'am, we'll let you go as soon as you raise your hand this time to make up for last time.
Okay, so I know that a lot of studies have been done to monitor humans' natural circadian rhythms. It's not exactly 24 hours that we think it is. It's a little bit longer. Do you feel like when you use this polyphasic sleeping that you're, without sort of guidance by the external zeitgebers, do you feel like your rhythms sort of stray a little bit away from what 24 hours to the rest of the schedule?
You know, I was looking for that actually when I was adjusting to it, even the first time when I was doing Uberman, because I thought that effect, I'm like, okay, like, no, what do they call it, Zeitgeber, no, like, you know, no external, I mean, not none, but you're bending. Actually, it seemed to me, of course this has to be subjective, but it seemed to me that it was more flexible that way, because I could move naps a little bit. Like you get very clearly tired, especially on a polyphasic schedule, because you're requiring more from your sleep. Your sleep is more efficient. You're getting less of it. So when it's time to sleep, it's a pretty noticeable feeling. Again, how much depends on the schedule. But yeah, and it was just kind of able to make me go, oh, okay, I'm going to sleep a little bit sooner now and a little bit later now, and it's almost like you, instead of having this big bar of sleep in the middle of your day that you can shift like this, you've turned it into like a spring, and you can kind of move sections of it around. That might sound weird, but that's really kind of the feeling that it is, where you're just like, oh, okay, and I don't know if you guys ever experienced that, but.
So I actually have a couple of things to add in here. One is that the original studies that found that the natural circadian rhythm was more than 24 hours, they were purportedly done in no light, which actually meant they just kind of dimmed the lights a bit. So later studies found that it's actually very close to 24 hours. It's still a little more, but it's not nearly as much beyond what people were claiming for a long time. The exact numbers are in my outline from last year's talk, which is on my website. And similarly,
I think it's on the order of less than a minute.
Yeah,
24 hours. That's enough to create stray.
Right.
After 10 years, is that what you said?
Seven.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't felt like I've been particularly disconnected from my circadian rhythm's different, but I still have one. Like, even when I'm awake, there are nighttime activities and nighttime body positions and nighttime things that go on. So it doesn't feel to me like I'm disconnected. Now, I'm on Everyman, so I do have a sleep that feels like a night sleep. You know, it frequently, it's only 3 hours long, but it still feels like I go to sleep and I wake up and it's the next day. It was different on Uberman, and I don't know what, like, if there would be an effect on Uberman if you did it for years.
It really gives you flexibility.
Right, and I don't, it's pretty cool.
And I want to say one more thing on that, and I want to raise my I'm not a doctor, wild speculation, anecdotal evidence flag, and say that, the amount of difference between the 24-hour day and your natural sleep cycle is probably much less significant than, one, the quality of the sleep that you're getting, and two, the regularity with which you're taking your naps. So if you're taking naps and going to sleep at the same time every day, that seems to work a lot better for people. Whereas if you're trying to switch it up frequently,
no, I agree.
That'll kind of throw you off more no matter what.
And when you're napping, it feels a lot like when you're monophasic, in the sense that you don't expect you're going to go to bed at 10:34 p.m. every night. For the most part, you know you're going to go to bed between like 10 and 11:30, depending on how you feel and when you have to get up in the morning and how your day was, etc. And there is some of that flexibility in my schedule too. So it's definitely like, I ate a meal kind of late. I think I'm going to sit up for another half hour and read or something like that. Like it's a sleep schedule, just like a diet is a diet. So all of those markers are kind of still there. It's just, it just happens in different timing. It's like, playing a different piece of music with it. Other one? We got a little bit more time? Yeah, please.
Yeah. So you were talking about waking up, and the question was also about going to sleep.
Yes, thank you for bringing us back to that. Yeah, excellent.
Can I get that one? So this has been my biggest challenge in my sleep life. And there's some really cool studies out there about melatonin. You'll often see it marketed as something that's meant to, you take it a few minutes before bed and it puts you to sleep. there are studies out there looking at people who are born blind who don't get signals from the outside world in the forms of light. And these studies have found that it actually works much better at shifting your circadian rhythm. So rather than taking a bunch of it, right before you go to bed, which puts way more than your body naturally produces into your system, if you take just a very small amount of melatonin, I think it's supposed to be like 5 hours before you go to bed, and look this up, don't quote me on it. It's very effective at making you get a little more sleepy a little earlier, and if you do that several days in a row, it's actually really effective at kind of shifting your sleep schedule, especially when combined with things like turning the lights out right before you want to go to bed, or like an hour before you want to go to bed.
Yep, there are other cues that you can use, both for going to sleep and waking up, that involve things like clothing. I can, and I did, sometimes when I was on Uberman, sleep in my clothes all the time. But I found it was really helpful to at least take off my shoes and socks, and and just kind of have yourself. And when I would wake up from a certain nap is when I would get up and change my clothes. So I would, before I went to sleep for another nap that was tough to go to sleep for, I would fold up my clothes and get them ready. And I would do that at the same time, like, okay, my 7 p.m. nap is hard. Before I do it, I'm going to fold up my clothes. And after a little while, like you are Pavlovian in that way. You just kind of, your body goes, oh, okay, I'm getting ready to go to sleep, and then when you wake up, you're like, whoa, clothes. Like, it's just, setting things up like that, especially if you can do it with consistency, can be really helpful, especially for getting to sleep. Environment is important for getting to sleep, but one of the things that napping regularly taught me is that when you are ready to sleep at the right time, environment actually, your body's perfectly capable of shutting out most things. And we see this, like kids and dogs and stuff, they'll fall asleep with their face on the corner of a thing. And I know this guy, I think everybody knows one guy like this, the guy who can go to sleep in the back of a motorboat while you're tearing down the ocean, or you're in the car and it's a bumpy ride and there's somebody at the corner like, it's like, and that, like, I never was like that before, but being polyphasic made me like that. And I find that even if I can't quite get all the way under into sleep, because I don't know if that makes sense, but after this long, it feels like there's kind of like degrees of like falling into and coming back out of a nap. And sometimes if the environment's so noisy, if I was trying to sleep here, I might only go like 80% of the way down before I woke up again 19 minutes later. But it would feel, pretty restorative anyway.
Let me have some things that can tell you what happened with that. I'm going to circle back around to that, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just a quick comment on context, and I'm going to try to do this without inadvertently propositioning Marie this year. So one of the big sleep hygiene things you'll see is they recommend only using your primary sleeping bed for sleeping and for sex. And this kind of works both ways. So if you nap and you nap in somewhere that isn't your bed, it conditions your body that, okay, this is the nap place. And similarly, if you have a bed that you only use for deeper sleep, it becomes a very comfortable, a very easy place for you to fall into a deep sleep. So as an example of how I apply this, I will often sit on my bed and watch TV or read, but I actually make sure to face the opposite direction than I do when I sleep, so I'm seeing a completely different set of visual cues, and I've found that to be actually really effective.
Yeah, that's definitely another one. Okay, we're gonna have to get close to wrapping up, so we'll take you and then you, and then we'll let you do the last of the equipment, and that's probably all the time we'll have. Okay, go ahead in the back.
So this is kind of mixing a bunch of topics you've touched on lately. So you talked about, so my question pertains to monophasic sleep, but daytime naps.
Okay.
You talked about how short naps, shorter than 30 minutes are better.
Yes.
I found personally, so I am one of those people that can just sort of knock out most of the time in the back of the car or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for short naps, I don't have trouble sleeping at night. But for short naps, I feel like I never quite, in 20 or 30 minutes, I never quite get fully asleep. It's still restful. It's not like I'm widely awake, but I only fall half asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still better to do it that way than to do a longer nap where you're going to fall more deeply asleep?
I think so, and I mean, the reason I think so is that first of all, taking longer naps during the day when you're monophasic can mess up your ability to sleep at night. And since you're monophasic, unless you're planning on reducing your nighttime sleep and modifying the naps so that they're in the right place, being deliberate about taking a sleep and a nap, if you're sleeping 8 hours at night and you don't need the nap, then you probably won't sink all the way under. Like you said, restful and I think still healthy and still a good thing to do. This is assuming you're getting a full night's sleep. If you're only getting 7 hours of sleep and you need 8, then that 20-minute nap is probably going to help you out in an environment and everything concerned. You should be able to fall asleep and sleep restfully. But if you're getting enough sleep at night, you don't need the nap. I think that's still a great thing to do. I think there's a lot to recommend it anyway. But yeah, you may not need to sleep as deeply for that period of time. But if you stay asleep longer and you fall asleep more deeply, but now it's in a big longer chunk, then you might not, sleep well the next night because your body will feel like you kind of filled up the tank a bit. It's like throwing 5 in the tank, and then next time you fill up, you're like, oh.
And I don't know if you'd make a comparison even to meditation, but I've had similar problems in the middle of the day where I can't quite fall asleep in the middle of the day nap. But I'll still take it, and even if I'm not intending on getting any sleep out of it, I will take 20-30 minutes and just chill the heck out. A lot of times, in the middle of the day when things get most stressful at work is kind of when you most need a break, even if you're not getting sleep out of it, it still helps. Just try to clear all the thoughts out of your mind, which I was originally doing just with the intention of getting to sleep, but I found, without knowing anything about meditation, I found that kind of had sort of a meditative effect.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I've experienced that too. And you're absolutely right that it can help you fall asleep to try and clear your mind and meditate in whatever way especially, unless you're doing yogic enervation breathing or something. As long as you're, it's restful and relaxful meditation, do it and then you win either way. If you don't fall asleep, you just spent 20 minutes meditating in the middle of the day, go you. So, yeah, I think we have to wrap up. Thank you, everybody. There will be lots of opportunity to talk at the Birds of a Feather tomorrow. At least I'm going to be there. Probably at least one of these guys will make it.
And anybody who can't make it there and wants to see gadgets afterwards, I'll find some place to squat.
Also, I have postcards. The postcards are for local bookstores. I don't live in Michigan anymore, so I thought it'd be really neat if I could get in touch with some of the local bookstores. I used to live here. So anyway, I made the postcards for them. If you take a postcard and you give it to a local bookstore and you just send me a picture anyway at all on the internet, I will give you half off of the book, electronic or physical, because I would appreciate help getting them into bookstores. So thank you guys very much. This was completely awesome. Really appreciate it.